Hey, you know what I like? Construction games. And that's a bit of a shame because construction games are in a slump right now. We keep getting the same games over and over. Not literally, of course. There are dozens of games coming out, but they all follow the same rules. They all have the same way that you build ships. They all measure how things perform in the same way. They all have the same gameplay and the same metrics. We're not getting very much innovation, and that's a shame because this gameplay, the idea of construction as gameplay, that's a wide space, and there's room for innovation at nearly every level. So let's talk about it. Let's stick to vehicle building just for the sake of simplicity, but I think the same arguments can be made about a lot of different kinds of construction games. So what is it about building a vehicle that is fun? Why have I spent thousands of hours building vehicles and thousands of hours building vehicle building games? Why is this so compelling? Well, the answer is it's not. Building the vehicles is totally crap. It's as dull as could possibly be. It's like voxel, 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 three-quarter voxel, voxel, voxel. And, that's not great, but here's the thing. Some games do try and improve on it, and they aren't the sorts of games I like nearly as much, like Space Trucker, where you grab parts and you have to put it in place. These games are fun, but they're not the kind of mental investment that I look for when I'm playing vehicle building games. So why is this so bad? Can we improve it? Well, I don't think we have to. I think that it's fine that it's bad. I would like to see it improved, but the whole point here is that it's not supposed to be fun to build the vehicle. Building the vehicle turns invisible. You're not thinking about placing individual voxels. You're thinking, oh, I need a chamber that's 3 by 8 for the reactor room, or, oh, I need a control surface here to steer the boat, and then we'll put engines here. No, wait, I want the engines up here. No, wait, I want the engines back here. That's what you're doing. You're not thinking voxel, voxel, voxel. Your mouse is doing the talking, and you're just thinking about zone, module, location, those sorts of, design details. The point of the actual construction mechanic is to be invisible, because the fun part is not the physical construction of the vehicle. It is imagining what that vehicle is going to do. Like when you were a kid and you made, Lego spaceships, and it was like, oh, this Lego piece is the wing, and then this part's the engine. You can tell because it's got a little red thing on it. And you show your friend, he's like, look how fast it is, it's got red things on the back. And you're like, yeah, look, I'll make it even faster, here's another red thing. And you show your parents, and they're like, that's a nice elephant. And you're like, no, it's not an elephant. That's the fun of vehicle building games. It's imagining what they're going to do. Now, computers have one big advantage over your parents, and that is that they give feedback instantly and understandably. When you hit play, you can run your vehicle around. You can play with it, see how it works. You can see whether it does the things you wanted it to do and how to fix it if it doesn't, and get inspiration for your next vehicle and how to polish it up. But here's a secret. That's maybe 20% of the vehicle building. The other, maybe 80%, is you imagining things that never happen. Like you paint a red stripe on your ship. The game doesn't care, but you think it looks cool. You put in a deck below below the waterline that is a pool hall with like bars and stuff. Well, the game doesn't know what that is, and the game doesn't care. To the game, it's just another empty deck with some clutter. But to you, it matters, and maybe it matters to other people, but it's outside of the game. So there is this thing where there's a chunk of the game that happens inside the game, but there's also a chunk of the game that happens outside the game, enabled by the game. Here's the problem. None of the modern designs take either of those into account. None of the modern designs help you get that juicy kick that you get from doing these things, from planning these things and executing them and then hitting play and watching things happen. None of them really allow you to bite into either side of that juicy apple. So what can we do to improve this? Well, let's start with the quote-unquote easy side, and that is the part the game doesn't know about. Because the game's never going to know about this stuff. Even if we created a mod that understood pool halls, it still wouldn't be enough, because we would just create a different kind of thing, and the game wouldn't understand it. Like, oh, now there's a medical bay over on this ship. The game's like, I don't know what a medical bay is. Or, oh, now there is, something like a song writer's room over here. And the game's like, I don't know what that is. So is there a way, besides an infinite number of mods, to allow a player to get this sort of thing into the world in a way that's juicier than it is right now? Well, sure. Let's go ahead and talk about how it works right now. If you put a pool hall in your ship, what do players have to do to see your pool hall? Well, they have to go to the workshop. They have to search the downloadable ships and find yours. They have to download... Oh, that's a little too high. They have to download your particular ship. They have to spawn your ship into their world. They have to explore your ship, and they have to find the pool hall, and they have to realize that pool hall is a pool hall and not, say, a lounge. That's a lot of steps, and even if they go through all those steps, at the end of step 7, they'll say, oh, cool, they'll turn around and leave. There's nothing that is less appetizing than this. It's like you spend a lot of time trying to make your pool hall cool, and then nobody will ever care. Even you won't care, because you'll never see it again, right? So how can we kick this up? How can we make it so that this works? Well, one thing we could do is we could add placards, right? So when someone goes into your ship, it can say, oh, look, there's a pool hall downstairs. So let's follow the pool hall, placards and find it. Sure, that's fine. But let's talk about leaving it outside of the game a little bit. Because when it's in the game, there are limitations as to what you can do. When it's not in the game, or when it's not in your vehicle, there aren't any. So let's talk about this as if we're removing all limitations. We're not concerned with things like balance or anything like that. What we're trying to do is get these ideas that don't exist in the game's domain to exist in the game without the game realizing it, so that they can be shared with ourselves and other players and that sort of stuff. So how do we do that? It's actually not that hard. You just have some method of putting in scripting. So for example, the player can select this room and then put in a pop-up. So the first time a player walks into this room, there's a pop-up that says, "This is pool hall." And now when they go in there, they'll immediately know that it's a pool hall. Moreover, this is something that's pretty easy to process. We can easily find out that this has a pool hall because it's got one of these pop-ups that has a pool hall. Maybe you put a hashtag in there, pool, and that means that when you upload it to the workshop, it automatically adds the tags for your rooms, and maybe it even automatically takes screenshots of cutaways with that room highlighted. That's not as hard as it might initially sound. As long as you understand that you're going to need this sort of capability, it's certainly not any more complicated than the basic voxel engine itself. So that's fine, but it's still not enough. Because what I'm actually doing when I'm picturing this pool hall is I'm not saying this is a pool hall. I'm saying, oh, then the guys will stand here and they'll play pool, and then over there they'll be having drinks at the bar, and then, oh no, they're going to get in a fight because someone dissed someone's mom, and now there's fisticuffs happening. This is not enough. We need to be able to script this kind of scenario. And you might be thinking, this doesn't sound like a vehicle building game at this point. Yeah, that's kind of the point. The vehicle building games that we have today are too limited. They're too rigidly stuck in their own reality. You're building the vehicle, and the vehicle is the only thing you're building. That's not good enough. We'll get into why in a little bit, but first I want to just talk about some of the other things that you can do, because what we're building here is a mission system. We're building a scripting language, probably a visual one, for creating missions. And this might sound like a challenge, but I mean, it's not any more of a challenge than creating physics sim. If we look at something like Stormworks, it's already got a drag and drop logic engine built into it. The problem is that drag and drop logic engine is securely linked to the ship's physical elements rather than to the mission system. Which means that the missions are going to be pretty bland, like in all of these games. So how can we make it more interesting? Well, let me script it. Let me put people in, little NPCs in here. Even if they don't make any sense, like they're in spacesuits or whatever, I can pretend that they are, shooting pool using an emote. And when the player walks in, what I can do is I can set up a script that just plays various emotes and does things. I can tell various NPCs to go various places. So I can script that bar brawl. And how much the players can interfere, well, that depends on our implementation, right? But then what happens is I can write a big ol' if statement, and I can say, if we can find a room with the hashtag medical, then go to that room. Otherwise, die. I don't know. Do something horrible. Be like, oh no, it's just a broken wrist, but now the ship has to be scuttled, whatever, right? And what does this do? Well, this is an open-ended mission parameter. It searches for anything in the spawn area that has the medical hashtag and is a room. And there is one over on this ship. So that means that this triggers a mass exodus of the various tagged characters to the other ship. How do they get there? Well, that's an implementation issue, and this is complicated. Now we're getting into the stage where this is starting to get to be seriously complicated, but you'd need to do this for missions anyway. So maybe they just go up here and they bring the ship over. We need to hop across, bring it over. Or maybe they fly across, or maybe they teleport across. Whatever makes sense in your world, right? But the point is that this is a mission system which allows you to easily connect mission elements on different ships, because this ship could easily have a mission that spawns when NPCs enter into the medical room and does stuff. Not every player is going to want to use this kind of scripting language, but they're all going to. The ones that create ships are going to have fun with it, and the ones that just want to play with ships are always going to want to play with the ones that have a scripted event. The games where you can just build a better tugboat and be satisfied with that is 1992. We're done with that, or at least I am. I enjoy building ships, but the part that gets stuck in the game is the least interesting part. I want all the stuff that's in my head, and that's mostly scenarios, things that happen. And I think that we have to get away from the idea that vehicle building games are only about the vehicles. It's clear that they are also about the missions. They are also about the vignettes. I mean, depending on your particular implementation. I'm not going to say that this is the best choice for everybody. It's not going to work out for my current game, for example, but this is something that I really think we need to consider and start moving towards. And if you think this is too much, well, maybe you're right, but let me go on and talk about the rest of it, which is how the game talks to you when you've built a ship that does things in the game. So you've built yourself a spaceship, and you put engines on it, and you hit play, and you get to fly it around, and you decide it's slow, so you put more engines on it. And this is the simulation part of the game. Exactly how it simulates is unimportant. It might be that every engine adds +1 mobility, or it might be that it's a really, really heavy physics sim, and now you're off center, and you're going to drift and that sort of stuff. It doesn't matter. The point is that we're in a conversation with the game. In our heads, we're doing all sorts of basic trade-offs. So it's like, oh, well, we'll put in cargo. Okay, but that makes the ship heavier, so we're going to need more engines. We'll put in rockets, but now we need to have a supply chain and stuff like that. So we're setting up our ship using all of these pieces, these modules. And this is a typical way for this kind of game to work. You are balancing your ship. And sometimes you balance it one way, sometimes you balance it another way. But it's a spreadsheet. Fundamentally, it's a spreadsheet. And you're going like mass divided by thrust equals acceleration. And so I need to reduce the mass, but I also need to keep the energy high. So it's that sort of situation, right? You're going like, okay, well, let's make this spreadsheet work out. Here's the thing. The game has to eventually care. When you hit play, the game has to somehow let you know whether or not you have enough guns or not enough guns for the situation that you're trying to face. Whether you're too fast or too slow, whether you've got enough cargo or not, whether you can mine things well or not. These are things that matter in the game, and therefore the game has to tell you. But The game usually doesn't. It's not configured to actually let you do the kinds of tests that you have in your head. For example, if I were to build this ship in Space Engineers, how would I test it? Well, maybe I have a bunch of friends, and all of my friends can get together, and they can take over other ships, and we can spawn and have a little duel. That's a lot of effort. Well, I could go and try and find a pirate base. Pirate bases have enemies built into them, but how big is the pirate base? Where's the pirate base? How long until we reach the pirate base? What sort of scenario is the pirate base in? There's too many unknowns, and I don't know how long I'm going to have to search before I find one. I could edit a mission and create pirate bases maybe, but that's hours of work. And then even if I do find a pirate base, what am I going to do when I want more of a challenge and need a bigger pirate base or another pirate base? Am I going to search until I find two? Am I going to spend 3 hours editing a mission? There's no tight feedback loop. Just as bad with planets, right? You know where the planets are. You can go find them pretty easily. But there's not really any way to set up a good mission system to test whether or not your stuff works within the planetary atmosphere. You go down and then, oh, it autosaves here, and now you're screwed because you either have to try and fly out of the atmosphere, try and land, or like cheat edit your way back into orbit. And I hope you remember the coordinates you started at because it's not very friendly, right? Anyway, you cut it. If you decide that this atmosphere is too thick or too thin, you are SOL. You do not have the ability to aim for a planet with more or less atmosphere, more or less gravity. There are a few planets, but they are few and far between, and there's only like 2 or 3 different settings, right? So this is not a very good situation for testing your grand ideas. Now, people are persistent. They will go and do this kind of annoying thing. But it would be nice if the game just let you and didn't try to get in your way for the sake of balance or something. Like, if I want to test my ship in a high-density, high-atmosphere world, just give me one. Give me a high-density, high-atmosphere world. I don't care if you think that I don't deserve it. I don't care if it doesn't fit into your carefully crafted universe. That is a mission I want to go on. And I designed a ship to go on it. Let me go on it. So how can you set this up? How can you make it so that the player can go on any mission they want? And here's the key. They have to be able to do it without talking to the game much. They have to be able to do it without spending hours setting up missions. They have to just be able to say, oh, well, you know, somebody on Reddit posted this challenge. I want to just go do it. And the game's like, I don't know what you're talking about, but you're welcome to do whatever you'd like. And the player goes on the mission, and the game says, oh, you did well, I guess, because you didn't explode. And the player's like, yeah. How can we do that? Moreover, just to add a little bit of complexity here, how can we do it in a non-violent game? Because if we put violence in, it becomes a little bit easier, but it also becomes a little bit more stock. But if we remove the violence, we've got to stretch our wings. How do we do all of that stuff in a game where there are no violent challenges, only non-violent ones? Well, there's already games that do that. So, for example, we got Kerbal. Kerbal is a largely non-violent game. And what it does is it embeds all of the game's challenges into the universe of the solar system. So if you want to go someplace that's got high gravity, maybe you'll go to Eve, and it's got high gravity. You want to go to a place that's got low atmosphere, you go to Duna. It's got low atmosphere. You want to go to a place that's got 50 moons, you go to Jewel. You want to do something complicated? Well, you can go to Jewel and fly by 18 of the moons, and then go to Duna, land and create a base, and then refuel and spawn a new ship and go back to Kerbin. These are all missions that you can do, and the game doesn't understand that they're missions. The game doesn't care that they're missions, but you do. And you can always change the parameters if things change. Like, if you land on Duna and then get stuck there, you can always send a rescue mission over to Duna, or you can post it to Reddit and say, like, oh, look, I got stuck on Duna, and someone else can go, oh, well, then I'll rescue you. This is how you do it. You embed your challenges into the game world itself. And that way, the players can always figure out what they want to do by simply looking at the game world map and going where they want to get their challenges. It's that easy. And for an added bonus, with only a very basic scripting language, you can easily let the players create their own arbitrarily complicated missions. Let's go ahead and give you a specific example from a different, a fictional game. When we decide what sort of parameters we want to allow the player to face challenges on, the key here is that these parameters start at 0 and then go up to basically infinity, depending on what sort of challenge they want. So for heat, we want heat to matter. So, there are some ship components that generate heat and some that disperse heat. But by and large, most players are not going to be too worried about heat. But if you fly near the sun, you get hot. And the closer you fly, the hotter you get. And so you don't think it's possible as the dev for someone to fly, into the corona of the sun and then out the other side, but someone will find a way. So you put in those high numbers. You make it so the heat gets so ridiculously high that you don't believe anybody will ever be able to survive. Because they'll surprise you, and they'll love doing it. Heat can also come from other sources, of course, but this is your primary map point for heat. And then what about disease? You want your game to be about, have health. You want it to have disease and concerns like that. So you build a disease engine. How does that work? Well, Venus has been terraformed and people live on it, but unfortunately, it's home to some bioengineered bacteria, and that's what terraformed it, and it's great, but you get sick. If you land here at the equator, you get steadily sick. If you land here up at the poles, you will get so sick you will die. Now, to put modules in to manage this sickness, you've got a couple of things you can do. For example, airlocks. Airlocks will keep the outside air from getting in. So that's a good way to lock the air out. This is an air, kind of manipulation system. It's not directly related to sickness, but it piggybacks. Then you've got maybe a filtering setup where you filter the air that comes in to keep it from getting too diseased. But those filters, they wear out over time. So, if those filters wear out, then people on your ship who are diseased are going to end up infecting other people through just the ventilation of your ship. And these are like air-specific atmosphere control modules. And then you've got maybe a sick bay with like beds. And they, the larger ones can handle more people, and the smaller ones can handle fewer people. And that hooks into maybe your pressurized interior system if you've got something like that. And then you've got medical supplies, because the medical room uses up medical supplies. So you've got a cargo bay full of those, right? And those get used up, and when you run out, you're not going to be able to treat people very effectively anymore. So maybe you also have a greenhouse that grows medical plants, right? So all of this can be easily extrapolated. You can go in here for days and just create technical systems that allow these kinds of builds, these kinds of considerations. And hey, look, maybe this greenhouse and this filter generate a lot of heat. So now you've got to put fins on it to get the heat down. But what if someone creates a mission where you have to land and pick up some people from Venus and then fly them real close to the sun, because in this mission, that's what kills the germs, and then you have to land them back on Venus. Well, now you have to worry about the heat generation. So you can't just slap in a bunch of greenhouses and filters, because you'll overheat and explode. And of course, the scripting language for this is quite simple. There's just a spherical bounding volume around the sun at a given range, which cures illnesses. And there is a spot on Venus with, an icon so you can get to it, that has a custom, building with some people in it that are marked as sick. This is challenging, but it is certainly doable. I don't see that this is any harder than doing what Kerbal or Space Engineers or even Stormworks has done. This is something that is less difficult than creating a full-fledged physics simulation for voxels. but it's much more intriguing to me. And there are other sorts of ways you can take it. I'm telling you one particular direction I would take it, but this is the sort of thing where we could discuss hundreds of variants, and I'm just trying to stretch my wings. Just trying to say, this is a place where people don't go. This is a realm where this genre refuses to look, and I'm not sure why that is. Let's give you one more example. Let's say that you want stuff in your game to break down. So you got your engines in the game and they break down, but if they can't be repaired, they can't break down. So you've got to have a mechanic for repairing them. Well, maybe you allow for interior pressurized passageways. And if you have one that's connected up to the engine, then you can fix it in shirt sleeves. It's easy. If not, then you're going to have to go out in a spacesuit, and that's going to be pretty bad. You're going to hold onto these handrails, right? Or if you forgot the handrails, you're going to have to go out in a jetpack spacesuit, and that's going to take forever and be super annoying. That's really good, but you have to put it on the map. So you build things that break your stuff on the map. The overheating doesn't just cause you to explode and die, it breaks stuff. There's a nebula where if you drive through it, your engines explode or break down. You put in areas where if people go there, certain things break. This is how I've been thinking recently, and at the moment I can't do it because I'm working on a different game, but my next game I have some cool plans for how to set up this sort of thing really pretty easily. The hard part is going to be the scripting language, because it's got to interface with the reality of the world well enough to do things like move people around and stuff, but maybe I'll just make it around teleporters. You know, if they want to move somewhere, they can just magically teleport. Who knows? Anyway, I wanted to make it clear that this is about construction. This is about when you're building a vehicle and imagining what it's going to do. You want to let the game let you do those things. If the game understands what you're trying to do and that it can simulate it, then you want the player to be able to reach that simulation without disrupting the flow of controlling the ship. So if I want to go to Jool, you let me spawn in and you let me go to Jool. It's that simple. If I want to do something that the game doesn't understand, then you let me tell the game what it should tell other players or even myself. Because the game doesn't understand it, but it does understand how to follow directions. Anyway, that's what I was thinking of while I was in Hawaii. Hooray! Tell me what you think. Where's the stop button?